Now guys, Catherine and Alan, you've set up a CoderDojo in Westport.
Delighted.
Tell us a bit about CoderDojo.
Well, CoderDojo was set up in 2011 by James Welton in Cork. It was to encourage young kids to learn how to code. An emphasis on technology, but to get them involved, more hands-on on what exactly happens behind the bonnet of a computer screen. So since then we've about 200 dojos in Ireland and about 1,200 dojos globally. So it's really captured the imagination. So we're delighted now to be starting a new dojo in Westport, here in Bank of Ireland. Catherine Burke has done an awful lot of work on putting a team together. I've probably been at one of the most best attended pre-mentor meetings. We have 6 or 8 individuals upstairs who are very interested in getting involved. And we'll be looking to launch a new dojo in Westport at the end of April.
End of April.
Yeah.
So Catherine, the bank have got involved in this, have they?
We have, yeah. I suppose it's something, it's part of our agenda is, I suppose, doing things that are of benefit for the community. And there's such a demand for CoderDojos. And I have to say, you mentioned it there, I was delighted with the response we got from the community in Westport in supporting us and getting this CoderDojo up and running. You know, we've 6 or 8 great people there who are going to volunteer their time to mentor their children on the night. So we're going to start it just after the Easter holidays. We have a Facebook page up and running, Westport CoderDojo. So you can go there for more information in terms of how to apply to come to our new CoderDojo in Westport.
And what age group are you catering for?
Well, the age group generally is somewhere between 7 and 17 years, but I think focus is a good thing to start with. So we're going to focus on senior primary school. So that's sort of 10, 11, 12 years of age. So 4th, 5th, 6th class. And hopefully we'll start with about 25 kids. I'd like to see a good proportion of those to be girls as well, because we really are putting an emphasis on getting more girls coding.
So it's a great thing to be coming to Westport, isn't it?
It's fantastic.
Fantastic, yeah. So the best of luck with it, guys.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Best of luck. And Owen might know it, is that we encourage kids not to ask questions from adults. And the rule is ask 3, then ask me. So the 3 that we get kids to do, and I generally, you know, on the first night I just kind of set a challenge. Does anybody know what CoderDojo is? And most kids would give it a bash, and then I'd say, does anybody know what CoderDojo isn't? There's generally science, and say it's not school. Or science, but I'd say it's not school. Then we'd move on to the ask 3, then ask me, and I'd say, who's the first person you think you would ask if you didn't know the answer to a question? And they'd all say, my teacher, or my mum, or my dad, or whatever. And you kind of go, no, bring it back a bit. So eventually the penny will drop. The first person they ask is themselves. Do I really not know the answer to this, or am I being lazy? And most kids are kind of trained from day 1 to ask mum or dad where their socks are, or where their school bag is, or where their coat is. And my answer is, go find it yourself. Go and explore, investigate, go and find out the answer yourself. And we play that game where you put your hand in the air, kids put your hand in the air as high as you go, and they all stand up, and is it as high as you go? And they all say, yes, as high as we go. And then I say, now put it higher. And they can all put it higher. And I say, well, now sit down, you're in trouble with me. You said a second ago that you tried your best to put it as high as it could go, and when I asked you to do that a little bit more, you were able to do that a little bit more. It's the same with coding, it's the same with anything. Schoolwork, football, ballet, whatever. Try that a little bit harder. The second person then they ask is another kid. So get them to, that kind of creates a collaborative effect in the room. And one of the most heard, I suppose, statements that I'd hear in a dojo would be a kid who might come up to a mentor and say, I don't know how to do this. And the mentor might say, well, I don't know how to do it either. But I know little Mary over there knows how to do it because I just saw her do it a few minutes ago. So little Mary might be 9, Liam might be 12. The 9-year-old girl is helping the 12-year-old boy, which is a huge age difference in those things. The girl's confidence level increases, but then they kind of get to know that little Mary over there, she's the clever one, so I go. So it creates that sort of investigative, collaborative effect there. The third person or thing then that we get kids to check before they ask an adult generally would be the internet. Mr. and Mrs. Google know the answer to everything. So Google, and my kids are nearly, they come home now to do their homework. You can see them start to ask me questions and they say, I don't know, I Googled it. they're investigating it themselves. And if they're too lazy to read the answer, what's the second biggest search engine out there? YouTube. Go watch a video. You know, I mean, and it is quite amazing to see kids, particularly with Scratch, which is the basic that we're going to start with. You could think of anything in Scratch and just put it into YouTube, and there'll be some person somewhere on the globe will have recorded a little video on YouTube on it. And then finally, if they don't know the answer, then you typically get them to ask it now. Now, you let them away with that for the first few weeks and so on. But you can see the kids are driving the dojo then. You know, so mentors are really facilitators or coaxers rather than coaches. So, you know, for the first couple of weeks you're kind of teaching them some basic skills, but after that then it's really the kids kind of evolve organically themselves. So that's really it. Now what I'm saying to Owen downstairs to get something like this started, there's a couple of ways in which you can run a dojo. The first way is that it's just open-ended. Nobody knows what's going on ever. I mean, there are some dojos going on for five years. DCU is 250 kids every Saturday. Presentation College in Bray have 180 kids. It's been going for 5 years. And kids come in and they just break off into their groups and they just do their own stuff. And you'll find some of the mentors will be particularly good maybe at HTML. So there's a little HTML group, some might be into robotics, a little robotics group. You know, so that can happen. But one of the good ways maybe to start a dojo, and I said it over, would be that there's 8 weeks between now and the end of May, let's say. So typically dojos follow the school year. So when schools are on holidays, dojos are on holidays. So let's say we have 8 weeks to the end of May, and now I know we're talking about junior schools or national schools, but you could say 2 of those weeks are Easter. So why don't we run a dojo starting the week after the Easter holidays and run it maybe to the end of May or the first week in June, so 6 weeks, and put together a 6-week kind of program for 20 kids. And then, you know, you could tweak it at the end. But you shut down then early June, regroup then in September, maybe the middle of September, run 6 weeks up to Halloween. Shut it down over Halloween, maybe 2 weeks, then maybe go again mid-late November and run maybe 4 weeks up to Christmas, and maybe have a bit of a Christmas party and a challenge or something there for the kids. Shut down until the end of January. So you're breaking it up into bite-sized pieces the whole way along, so it's manageable. You kind of know, well, there's 6 weeks of dojos coming up. I can be involved in 3 of those. So can somebody else be involved in 4 of them? Can somebody else be involved in the other 3? You know what I mean? So you're going to break it down into bite-sized chunks like that. And approach it from that point of view, and then maybe you can put together a little plan. This is what we do for this 6 weeks, and maybe some new kids might join in the next 6 week period, so we'll just do that first 6 weeks with those, but some of the other kids will have come back, so maybe we'll move them on to this, and so on. So it's just a little bit of thinking involved, but we start at scratch. So the first week I would generally start with, there's a cup game that we play, which is on the code.org website. It's just red plastic cups, and we get kids to build a castle with cups. And then we get them to code that castle by just using 4 arrows. Up, down, across or back. And you just do it on a whiteboard or on a flip chart. And you just have a page of arrows, but the kids can read it. Like, you know, if you've 10 cups, you've 10 lines of code, you know, because each cup is coded and stuff. So you get them then to play, they can twist cups around and make crazy castles and stuff like that. But it starts to get them thinking logically. The next thing that we move them on to is we move them online to code.org, to the hour of code. And I generally ask the kids, how long does it take to do the hour of code? And you'll get all sorts of answers from 15 minutes to 3.5 hours. It does exactly what it says on the tin. It's an hour of code, but a lot of the game, it's the gamification of Scratch. So Disney are quite heavily involved in the hour of code. So there's a Moana game, which was that recent Disney movie, Frozen, Star Wars, Minecraft, Angry Birds, those sorts of. They're just little pocket-sized coding games. 20 levels in each game. and in order to get from one level to the next level, you have to solve a problem on the screen through coding. So it's a really good way to get kids to start thinking computationally. There's your first week. That'll last an hour and a half. Second week then, get them offline, get them to download Scratch onto their laptops, do the basics of Scratch. Has everybody seen Scratch? Yeah. You do the basics of Scratch, so you've got your screen here, you have your toolkit here, and your worksheet here. Do the basics of moving sprites, changing backgrounds, maybe do a little bit of painting, setting boundaries. Then what we would do is introduce maybe a Pong game. Does everybody remember Pong, which was the tennis game with the two paddles and the ball? So there's a lot of coding involved in that. So you're changing the background, that's one line of code. You've got two paddles, that's two more lines, or two more blocks of code. You've got a ball, that's three, you might put in a scoreboard, 4 or 5. And they're learning all these principles where you could just do a one Pong player game. So they develop a lot of skills there, and techniques and vocabulary and language. Then the following week, maybe you get them to advance the Pong game, or you may introduce, get them to use the theory that they used in Pong to build a maze game. And I've seen kids, there was one guy, Carl, in Branck Square branch in Dublin. He was 10. And we get an awful lot of kids on the spectrum. This guy was quite autistic, but he had a 20-level maze game that he had developed. You know, every time he'd finished one maze, we'd go on to a harder level and harder and harder. But I went down to him at one stage on a dojo, and I said, "There's nothing on your screen, Cathal." He said, "No, come back now in a minute." I'm nearly finished. And it was basically, he had a red ball up here and a kind of a basket down here, and I said, "There's nothing there." He said, "No, I'm nearly finished." So he called me back and he said, "Now press start," so whatever, the green flag. And I moved about an inch, the ball an inch, and it hit a block that flashed just for about a second and a half and disappeared. And I went, "Oh, I know what you've done here." So then I moved it and it hit another block. So he had a memory maze game that he had created. This is kind of week 5 for a 9 or 10-year-old. You know, so he was just using his, and eventually we had to get him off the maze game because he was going for 100 levels on this maze game. He wasn't stopping. So we moved him, because he was particularly good, off Scratch. I suppose the next level up then would be App Inventor, which is very like Scratch. It's a similar platform. But it's online, but you can develop apps with an Android app with, and then you might move kids on to Python, HTML, or you know, we start to introduce things like Raspberry Pis. So you know what any of you seen Raspberry Pi? Raspberry Pi, that's about a €40 computer. You can buy them online. There's, you know, a couple of USB inserts. You can plug in a keyboard, mouse, screen, memory card. They have to download an operating system onto it. So they basically build their own computer. My 12-year-old, I have a few of these at home. She took one. Within 20 minutes, she had an operating system on it. She downloaded Kodi, and she was watching illegal movies. You know, so it's not just about coding. It's just about getting kids involved. You can hook these up to robots. You know, kids, they'll start asking you hard questions. That's when the internet gets really good. Go and ask Google. So it's kind of an evolution of sorts. But I think, you know, getting you started, it really would be Scratch. Set your 4 or 5 or 6 weeks. You know, what if you did the cups and the arrow code, introduction to Scratch, Pong game, maze game, and then sort of 2 weeks of kind of free coding, you're into the summer already. And then it's a matter of then, okay, deciding, do we set tasks then in September? Do we take those 4 kids, you know, maybe 2 girls, 2 boys who are particularly good, and maybe do something for Enterprise Weekend in November, and they might create a Scratch Westport maze game with lots of businesses on it. If you go into the bank, you get credit. If you go to, I don't know, the supermarket, you lose credit. You know, you start thinking, get the kids to start thinking about, you know, how they might move the principles of their games on to actually something that's sort of practical, and then go from there. Hugely important. CoderDojo is a club, as I said. Get the parents involved. Best run dojos in the country are generally dojos where mentors are also parents, because there's a sort of a personal interest. And I do find, like everything, GA, rugby, soccer, ballet, hockey, swimming, parents try to dump kids at dojos, and that's not what CoderDojo is about. It's not a childcare facility, and you're giving up your time for their kids free of charge. So they need to get involved as well, and roll up their sleeves. So that's it. I mean, there's no other magic to it. What I would say, you know, as I said, I've got 4 kids, very happily married, but my wife and myself slag each other every now and again. Said we'd never set a date, we'd never got married. It's probably the most important thing to do. Set your date, your opening date, your launch night, and work back from that and say, well, what do we need to do? Register the dojo. You know, we have a registration form. Maybe a couple of you might need to be guard vetted. Not all of you, because you know, there would be kind of rotation there, but we generally like to get 1 or 2 people guard vetted. That can be done through CoderDojo, and it can be done in tandem. If laptops are possibly needed, maybe do a call out to the chamber to say that you're starting a dojo and we need maybe 5, 6, 7 laptops. Every business has an old laptop in a drawer or a desk or a boot of a car or something like that. And then just get started. Really would be the, you know, the way forward after that. There's nothing challenging about CoderDojo as long as you use your little bit of imagination and a little bit of planning. So I presume that there are a couple of techies in the room.
Few, I think.
Yeah. This is probably, and I'll be really honest, this is probably the best attended mentor meeting I've ever been at. So it's very positive. I mean, it really is positive. What we would say, sort of the mentor-kid relationship, we would say probably 1 mentor for every 4 to 7 kids. You know, as dojos evolve, maybe 1 mentor for every 5 to 10 kids. You know, we'd have dojos on every street corner if we had enough mentors. So, you know, if you've 20 kids, 3 or 4 people there and a couple of parents. A lot of it's just man management, as I said before. It's like, I don't know how to turn on my laptop, or my mouse isn't working, or there seems to be dirt in the mouse, or can't get on the internet, or, you know, this is just my screen is frozen. You know, this minor stuff. And possibly you might get 1 or 2 kids who might have behavioural difficulties, but they could turn out to be the best coders in the room eventually, but they just might need a little bit more hands-on help in the first couple of weeks. But other than that, there's nothing else to it. The structure of a dojo is that you've what's called a champion on the top. And the champion is the person who kind of, for the better word of it, runs the dojo. So that person makes sure the venue is ready, make sure that all the mentors know what's going on, and make sure that all the kids know what's going on, so on. So they're the kind of the person who, I suppose, pulls the strings a little bit. Then below that you have mentors. And you may have mentors, you might have a senior mentor, somebody who's going to be there every week. And then you might have, you know, the guy who's good at HTML, or, you know, the person who's good at, or the woman who's good at Java or Python, or somebody's good at robotics or whatever. And then they can specialise. And then you have kids and parents. So if you want to committeeize that, you know, sometimes you get meetings about meetings. But I do think in the early stages, it might be useful to kind of say, well, this is what we do for the first 6 weeks, and let's just lock it down. And then you might have maybe 1 or 2 who might say, well, this is maybe what we might do. If we're to break off and do App Inventor, these are 2 projects that we do. And if we're going to break off and people are going to do HTML and something else, maybe we get them to make these 2 websites or something like that. So that can be useful. We've loads of resources on the CoderDojo website. If you just go into the CoderDojo.com website and press resources, there are what we call sushi cards. You know, you go into a sushi restaurant, there's a photo of all the food. It's pretty much the same. It's like, you know, they're kind of screen grabs of, you know, a particular project. And I'd have no problem, like this, off the top of my head, in Scratch, there's a sushi card in there for a shark game. I have no problem printing off the 7 or 8 pages of it, handing it to some kids and say, you know, maybe you guys work on the shark game over the next week or two. And it just takes them step by step by step by step by step, you know, background, animating bubbles, you know, a shark chasing a small fish and turning around and a big scoreboard and stuff like that. And you can do that with any of the sushi cards, you know, print them off, give them to kids, get them started. And then after that, once they've learned the principles, it's a bit like learning any language. Once you've developed the basics of vocabulary, then you just start to kind of kick in. So committing could be a good idea. Yeah.
I suppose from ourselves here in the branch, I mean, we can provide the space, and Caroline and Owen are our 2 champions for the CoderDojo. I think we have it registered, haven't we? So, I mean, we can help in terms of, we get a WhatsApp group going, you know, maybe like
Facebook
page, and, you know, send out the communications to the mentors and the parents and the children as well, you know, to start with, maybe for the first 6 to get it off the ground. So what would you think yourselves in terms of a good day or time? If we go for the first week after Easter holiday, say, is there any particular evening, like, what works best?
Normally run on an evening or a Saturday, what works best for the business?
Again, Saturday mornings generally no, because of sport. Mums and dads are busy on Saturday morning. Most bank dojos operate on a Monday through Friday night evening. And why is it evenings and not after school? Because mentors are working in general. Trevor Curry branch runs theirs on a Friday night. Personally, I can think of a lot better things to be doing with my kids on a Friday night.
How long is the session about?
An hour and a half, I think, for the age group we're talking about. I mean, I go back to DCU Dojo. DCU Dojo has 250 kids every week. About 80. They've about 80 girls, which is CoderDojo girls. Theirs runs from kind of 10 to 4. But most dojos are sort of an hour and a half long. You know, 10 or 15 minutes getting them settled in, 10 or 15 minutes getting them out, and then probably 70 minutes of kind of coding or whatever. So I think that's plenty. So most branches are Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and it could be 5:30 to 7, 6 to 7:30, that sort of thing. Or, well, it's up to the bank and branch. There are security issues with opening a branch on Saturday and staffing issues, but generally it might be kind of 1 to 1:30, 2 or something like that on a Saturday.
When the Chambers of Commerce run them?
No chambers run them, but I have found that the chamber can be useful for a couple of things: reaching out for hardware, reaching out for mentors, and reaching out for ideas, because a town like Westport probably has a couple of tech businesses in it, and what I would like to see more happening with dojos, maybe not in the early stages of this one, but getting those businesses to bring actually their work into kids and showing kids, well, this is something that we're working on. It could be AI, you know, artificial intelligence, it could be virtual reality, it could be a robot, it could be anything, you know, web design. So the kids can see that this stuff here that they're working on could end up like that at some stage, you know. So it becomes very, they can begin to see a pathway. This stuff there as well, I mean, if you reach out to the chamber, as I said, actually the case, as I said, that's about 40 euros. I think the case costs 35. So that's how cheap these things are. You can actually buy them now with little sort of tablet screens. Then there's this, it's kind of the baby brother of it, which is a code bug, which again is just a little circuit board. You can put in a watch battery there. It's got a little LED screen and you can program it. Just kids, so we did a couple of things on Paddy's Day. Kids were, you know, programmed kind of shamrocks or Happy St. Patrick's Day with scroll across. But you can also, on those little pins there, you can put on sound cards and things so they can add to it. But again, it's getting kids to think that computers aren't just a hard piece of plastic with a keyboard, that they can actually go and make stuff. They're about, I think, about 15 or 16 euros. But again, chamber's useful for that as well, because you can reach out every now and again and say, look, can we want to raise 150 euros or something like that for 10 code bugs or whatever. So simple answer is they're not. The libraries are beginning to latch onto it. There's a lot of excess space in libraries as well. But I've seen dojos in bank branches, in libraries and hotels. In Sri Lanka there's 2 dojos, one of them's on a bus. It doesn't even have electricity. They can be literally anywhere that's relatively dry and reasonably safe. So it's just down to kids and mentors.
Do you ever recommend a minimum age?
Yeah. I suppose if you looked at CoderDojo in its totality, the age group runs from about 7 to 17. Now, why is it 7 and not 6 and 5 and 4? Typically, kids just don't have the attention span below 7. In a lot of cases, they may not even be able to read properly, and then just keyboard skills and stuff like that can be. But I would never say no, as long as they're not really distracting the other kids. So that's the 7. What I tend to find is the core age group is that sort of 9 to 13, 14. What you tend to find is the 14 plus are the hardcore coders. These are kids who are really into it. What you tend to find is that kids get a little bit too cool for school when they hit sort of 14, 15, and CoderDojo is for geeks, and that's in my past, so I'm not doing that anymore. So really the core age group is that sort of 9 to 14. 7 to 9, there's a lot of concentration involved in it, and then just kind of the older group, unless they're really into it, they tend to kind of fall away.
There's distractions.
Absolutely, life gets in the way sometimes. But you do find, if you go to the Coolest Projects, which is the biggest annual event in CoderDojo's calendar, it's in June. 800 projects in the RDS on a Saturday. I think it's Saturday the 17th. You'll have ages there from kids making a scratch game all the way up through, kids developing communication systems for their aunts with cerebral palsy, or a smart home system out of one of these. There's some amazing prize winners. In fact, Niamh Scanlon is a girl that we like constantly. Niamh won the top prize at CoderDojo or the Coolest Projects 2 years ago. Her dad has an electric car. She'd be 14 now, maybe 15. Her dad has an electric car, and the ESB have a lovely website and a lovely app that shows where all the power points are around the country. So herself and her dad were in the car one day, and he rocked up to one of these car points, but it was being used and there was another car waiting, and these things take an age to charge. So he was effing and blinding in the front of the car. She went back into the DCU dojo the following week and started to develop a patch for the app and for the website that would show not only where the car points are, but whether they were being used or not, and how long left the estimate would be before another car could plug in. She was, I think, 12 at the time doing that. And I'm sure the ESB had spent millions developing that system, and 12-year-old found the problem. She'll continue on, and you'll see some of those at the Coolest Projects, but generally the kind of core age is that sort of 9 to 15, which is the kind of the age that you're looking at there. They want to learn, at that age. And if you try and grab a 14-year-old, they don't want to go back to the basics. It's a bit like an adult learning Spanish or French. They want to be able to talk Spanish or French straight away. They don't want to have to go back to that cat, that long, and that. It's the same with 14, 15-year-olds. They don't want to go back to the basics and scratch because it's just beneath them. So what I would do is I'd send down to the lads here. I have, as I said, it's non-curricular, but I sort of a kind of very loose program as to what maybe the first 5 or 6 weeks would look like. And I have a little Word document just on, I suppose, essential resources for